Hi, welcome to the Second Rainbow Coalition Reading Group. Today we are reading Chapter 9, The Lincoln Offensive, of the book The Young Lords by Johanna Fernandez. In order to make best use of our time today, we're going to forego the Statement of Unity and dive right into the material. Would anybody like to take a turn reading first? If not, I will go first.
I can start off.
Sounds good, comrade. Thank you.
All right. The Lincoln Offensive Towards a Patient Bill of Rights. This is a quote from Che Guevara. A human life is worth more than all the wealth and the richest man. Ernesto Che Guevara. A year after their garbage and lead offensives, the Young Lords launched a similar wave of tuberculosis activism in the context of grassroots service work in the community. The potentially serious lung disease, highly contagious and airborne, had long been linked to poverty and overcrowding. Small New York tenement apartments with little circulating air or sunlight were perfect breeding grounds. Puerto Rican migrants were further disadvantaged by coming from the island where the mortality rate from tuberculosis was the highest in the world. In May 1970, the group reported that it was conducting door-to-door medical home visits, and its members had administered 800 tuberculosis tests in East Harlem and the Bronx. According to the group, the administration of Project Prospect Hospital even permitted them the use of a chest X-ray machine, a concession to their petition after word got out among locals that the Young Lords were conducting tests alongside doctors and technicians. The logic and objective of the Young Lords' public health efforts were explained in a June 1970 issue of Palante. Quote, services are extended out to the people. Visit them in their home and setting up free health clinics in every block. This type of service, which keeps people from getting sick in the first place, is called preventative medicine, quote. As they went door to door, they offered medical services alongside political education, explaining that, quote, even though TB has been eliminated among the rich, the middle class, and the white people in general, it is alive and spreading in the Puerto Rican and Black colonies of America, the richest country in the world, unquote. As they began to conduct tests at Prospect Hospital, before I say that, I'm going to go back to that picture that they showed. It says 7 demands. And on the picture, it says, number 1, no cutbacks in jobs or services in the emergency room or section. 2, immediate funds to complete the building of and fully staff the new Lincoln Hospital. 3, door-to-door preventative care program emphasizing nutrition, drug addiction, child and senior citizen care. 4, we want a permanent 24-hour complaint table. 5, we want $140 a week minimum wage for all workers. 6, we want a daycare center for the children of patients, workers, and visitors at Lincoln Hospital. 7, we want to total self-determination of all health services through a community worker board to operate Lincoln Hospital. This board must have shown its community to serve the people. All right. As they began to conduct these tests at Prospect Hospital, they also tried to partner with the New York Tuberculosis Association, a public agency that operated a mobile chest X-ray unit. The Young Lords argued that the X-ray truck operating from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. on alternate days did not accommodate the work schedules of laboring people. They proposed to staff the truck around the clock with the many local technicians and doctors who had already offered to volunteer. Citing the existence of city-managed programs with trained personnel and effective technology, the Tuberculosis Association denied the Lord's request. Determined to carry their intended project to fruition and prepared, perhaps even eager to employ publicity to their benefit, the young radicals alerted both the press and the police of the time and place of an impending action. On June 17, 1970, the Young Lords hijacked the association's mobile clinic and with a Puerto Rican flag unfurled above the bus, drove off. Another classic Young Lords moment, complete with cameramen capturing footage for the evening news. Via the unit's loudspeaker, the Young Lords carried their message throughout Spanish Harlem, explaining the motives for their actions and inviting residents to get tested for tuberculosis at a new location. The next day, they parked the truck across from their office on Madison and 11th Street and rechristened it the Ramon Emirate Emirate let me see. Emeterio.
Emeterio.
Entonces, health truck. Yeah, I gotta start working on my Spanish again. After the 19th century Puerto Rican revolutionary physician, the mobile unit tested hundreds of people its first day in its new location. Within hours of the hijack, the Young Lords had negotiated an agreement with the director of health for the East Harlem district, Thomas Jones, authorizing the group to operate the unit at the city's expense for 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. Having established a record of community services through their previous door-to-door work, and having demonstrated their ability to mobilize hundreds of inner city youth at a moment's notice, the group could count on a measure of bargaining power in local politics, especially as the specter of urban rioting weighed on the minds of city officials. Referring to the Young Lords, Jones said, quote, "Their methodology is in dispute, but we must relate to where the community feels they need the service. Occasionally, confrontation does occur, but I think we can work it out," unquote. Jones' rationalization was a kind of admission to the Young Lords' charge of government indifference to the needs of the city residents. Moreover, that Jones' formulation, quote, "relate to where the community feel they need the service," unquote, echoed the Young Lords' manner of speech as an example of their impact on public discourse, values, and standards for municipal services. Jones seemed to have agreed to the arrangement primarily out of fear. The Young Lords' paramilitary style, confidence, and rhetoric was threatening to many, and yet they spent most of their time engaged in public service. Within the organization, these two currents existed side by side without any seeming tension or incongruity. The Young Lords would test the boundaries of their muck raking in the spring of in summer of 1970. Surpassing prior challenges, they set their sights on daunting tasks, addressing head on the injustice and substandard conditions plaguing neighboring Lincoln Hospital. Somebody else want to take over?
I'll try for a while. The blight and transformation of an aging institution. As the tuberculosis testing continued, the Young Lords were expanding their reach north to the borough with the largest conglomeration of Puerto Ricans in New York. Though East Harlem remained the cultural home of Puerto Ricans, by 1960, 100,000 Boricuas had settled in the Bronx. Most were concentrated in its southernmost section. The Young Lords turned to, quote, "the Puerto Rican borough was a rational progression in the organization's growth and identification with Puerto Rican nationalism." In April 1970, the group opened its South Bronx office on Longwood Avenue on the corner of Kelly Street. The expansion brought greater responsibilities. It challenged an emerging class of leaders and new members to take on broader obligations. That same month, the group began to host weekly outdoor late-night film screenings as form of political education. They featured Los Siete de la Raza, the story of 7 Chicano youth accused of killing a police officer in San Francisco, and Black Panther, on the origins of the Black Panther Party, BBP, among others. Leading the efforts, Carlos Aponte reported in Palante that people from the block on Intervale Avenue between Kelly and Beck Streets stopped the police on a number of occasions from breaking up the screenings. The Lords also extended to the neighborhood a practice they began in East Harlem 6 months earlier, a door-to-door medical visit, home visits on Saturdays. Of their reception in the South Bronx, they reported, quote, our recruitment is growing rapidly, and many brothers and sisters are offering us their services, making us a part of their everyday lives. By the late 60s, the South Bronx was one of the most impoverished districts in the nation, a decaying strip of industrial land where 80% of the housing existed in a state of moderate to severe deterioration. I've seen pictures of that era. It looked like a bombed out place. It looked like Iraq and after the war. Against the onslaught of poverty discourse, which interpreted urban poverty as a racial phenomenon, the Young Lords used a well-timed article, quote, the South Bronx, time bomb, end quote, to highlight for Palante readers the large social and structural forces at work in the neighborhoods like this one. In it, Richie Perez explained, there are no jobs available. We are in prison in a vicious cycle. No education, no jobs, and no way to move out of the rundown, unhealthy, and dangerous tenements of the South Bronx, end quote. As early witnesses to the borough's deepening crisis of deindustrialization and its social consequences, the Lords analyzed the root causes of what sociologists would later call, quote, the urban crisis. The Palante article highlighted the public health crisis at the center of this dilapidated environment where rats, roaches, uncollected garbage, no steam or hot water, and broken, unrepaired windows contributed to poor health. It also reported that the area's dirtiest, most overcrowded streets, Simpson and Fox Streets between 163rd and Westchester Avenue, have the highest death rates of any blocks in the entire city. The Young Lords learned the morbid statistics and mastered the art of humanizing their fallout. The South Bronx had the highest rate of heroin addiction in the world, a mortality rate 50% higher than the rest of the country, and an incidence of syphilis and gonorrhea 6 and 4 times the national average, respectively. The leading cause of death among adolescents and young adults were heroin overdose and trauma. Apprised of the neighborhood's demography, his chronic social problems, and a pre-existing grassroots effort for improved patient services at nearby Lincoln Hospital, the Young Lords settled on this aging hospital as a major organizing site. In a district with disproportionately higher medical needs than other parts of the city, access to medical care was afflicted as the population it served. Lincoln's 350-bed facility was charged with caring for a catchment area of approximately 500,000 people. Not surprisingly, the facility was so overcrowded and the bed shortage so severe that patients were often treated in corridors. I've seen that in Chicago. These conditions were not new, and Lincoln Hospital was not alone. 2 decades earlier, the Daily News editorial that noted that the city's public hospitals, Harlem, Queens, Lincoln, Fordham, Kings County, are sick with nurses and doctors scarce and overworked, patients crowded into every nook and cranny, and service generally going to the devil. The Lincoln crisis, however, was extreme. The hospital had outdated turn of the century open ward and clinical interior that, according to one doctor, looked more like an armory or abandoned factory than the Center for the Healing Arts, end quote. A study of municipal hospitals in New York offered a lengthy list of deplorable conditions. The periodic power outages in its main building were the consequences of generators installed in 1927 that were too weak to power the hospital's new technology in 1969. Air conditioners in the surgical recovery room did not work. The building's walls had paint with lead based of 28%, a figure far exceeding the legal levels for retail paint. In a hospital that treated countless cases of child lead poisoning and where pediatric ward was meant to be a temporary refuge for the late 60s, re-ingested lead in the late 60s, re-ingested lead in the ward. Meanwhile, the lack of centralized administrative structure thwarted the hospital's ability to systematically address such problems. Under these and other conditions, disgruntled functionaries and medical staff customarily rendered services grudgingly. By all accounts, the Lincoln experience was abominable. Starting with Eastern European immigrants in the 1920s, successive generations of neighborhood residents referred to Lincoln as quote, the butcher shop of the South Bronx. The situation was no better for employees, still in the process of transformation from a charity foundation to professional institutions. Hospitals were prone to underpaying the non-professional employees they hired because of their long hours and labor-intensive, unsanitary, and repetitive duties. Hospitals, quote, had long been the urban employer of last resort for super exploited newcomers, now demeaned by their occupation and their race. Hospital salaries in New York were so low that a large percentage of their unskilled, predominantly Black American and Puerto Rican labor force was eligible for public assistance. Moreover, hospital administration generally extend to their non-medical staff the same paternalism accorded patients, a predicament reflecting institution origins in charity. This was a kind of largely ignored, quote, social violence the young lords were gearing up to expose. But in the decade before the young lords set their sights on the ailing hospital, Lincoln had become the site of at least 3 major reform efforts that helped people prepare the groundwork for the young lords' intervention. The first took the form of semi-privatization. In 1959, Mayor Robert Wagner authorized the affiliation program, which turned over the management and staffing of New York's public hospitals to the city's major private medical schools. Under the new program, Lincoln became an affiliate of Albert Einstein College of Medicine. As discussed in Chapter 4, under the agreement, medical schools received operating budgets to staff and run the hospitals. In return, the schools reaped the benefits of unmonitored access to poor population of patients prone to illness. They provided opportunities for medical research and a fertile training ground for interns and residents in the range of clinical departments housed in public hospitals. The new affiliation policy followed the trend in healthcare toward the expansion of large medical institutions. It also responded to the growing public debate on the crisis of healthcare and fragmented character of its delivery. In a market of spiraling costs produced by the free-for-service dictum of the country's medical healthcare system, city hospitals continue to languish, albeit under slightly less deplorable conditions. A second attempt at reform lacked the global scope of the affiliation system, but its link to federal programs brought national attention to the hospital, and its experimental partnership with the employees drawn from the community became the wellspring of the struggle to come. In 1963, the Albert Einstein Medical College inaugurated the Lincoln Hospital Mental Health Services. It was a network of services with diverse points of contact between mental health providers and patients, designed to deliver related services and care at the neighborhood level, in schools, churches, and community centers. Its treatment protocol included traditional talk therapy, drug rehabilitation, mental health education, and community action. The program owed its unorthodox mission to the experimental stipulations of its two funding sources, the 1961 National Community Mental Health Center Act and the Office of Economic Opportunity, the federal agency that implemented the so-called war on poverty. The first legislation funded local mental health clinics such as LHMHS as part of its larger goal of consolidating a shift in psychiatry already underway from treatment of the mentally ill in asylums to treatment in private practices and privately run community centers. The second source of funding sought to improve access to mental health care in urban and rural areas and mandated the, quote, maximum feasible participation of community residents in programs it funded. In 1967, LHMHS achieved national recognition when a documentary film called Storefront chronicled the, quote, struggles and success of its team's unorthodox community practice. The clinic's progressive in-house psychiatrists, among them Dr. Mike Smith, believed that psychiatric treatment should emphasize talk therapy rather than psychoactive drugs to alleviate depression, addiction, and other psychological dysfunctions. The program's non-medical communities staff contribute their own vision for improved mental health. They underscored the significance of patient involvement in the life of their community to foster meaning in and control over their lives. Influenced by the era's discourse on social inequality, these new approaches focused on the relationship between the individual and society. They emphasized the manifold social problems of urban life, which, according to a growing number of specialists and health professionals, contributed significantly to the psychological breakdown of individuals in society. Given the magnitude of the problems at Lincoln, LMHS achievement though groundbreaking were at best piecemeal and symbolic. However, the program hired and trained an emerging segment of workers uniquely situated to launch and win more consequential reforms. Like other mental health centers in New York, LMHS employed community members with funding from the New Careers Program, a unique project of the OEO, an offshoot of a 1962 federal policy designed to train on the job displaced blue collar workers and the permanently unemployed as legal aids, social health technicians, vocational rehabilitation specialists, police community service aides, and community mental health workers. To that end, LMHS hired dozens of Black American and Puerto Rican mental health health workers. LMHS applicants underwent a rigorous 3-month interview process that tested for communication skills, maturity, and a high threshold for withstanding high stress scenarios with patients. Those hired, among them Richard Weeks, Ruth Dawkins, Aubrey Dawkins, Danny Argate, and Cleo Silvers, were promised ongoing training to ensure the possibility of promotion and advancement in the health industry, now the fastest growing sector of the American economy. Their social location, both as semi-skilled workers in the city's poorest public hospitals and as residents in the hospital's catchment districts, was strong motivation. They approached their work seriously with the expectation that they would help build a clinic responsive to their community's complex health needs. Quote, as Puerto Ricans and Black workers in the emergency rooms and clinics, one organizer reported, we see what oppression in the hospital is like, the inferior medical attention our neighbors are subjected to or obligated to accept, end quote. As for others in their cohort, dramatic examples of resistance in New York shaped the consciousness of these young people. Seminal events were the Harlem riots, the battle to desegregate the city school, sit-ins in active construction sites, protests against racial discrimination in employment and labor unions, the fierce images of Malcolm X, and numerous rent strikes, among other struggles. Their counterparts in the South had raised the bar on what a young person might dedicate his or her life to. Here, too, this cohort was morally repulsed by poverty and war and eager to be part of something larger. Unlike those who founded the New York chapter of the Young Lords, this cohort of young people of color, though very bright, did not go to college. Rather, they joined the labor force during or immediately after high school. Back at LHMHS, they proposed and organized social actions intended to improve patients' day-to-day lives, from challenging evictions to helping raise awareness about public health. The Black Panther Party proved instrumental in the transmission of these methods and ideas at Lincoln. The group had already initiated a wide range of radical public health programs in Black communities across the nation, including sickle cell anemia project in New York, ambulance services in Pittsburgh and Oakland, and campaigns to test and raise awareness about tuberculosis, anemia, and lead poisoning. In the Bronx, the organization had helped draft leaflets, conducted workshops on race and public health for the mental health workers, and even sat in at staff meetings in which core members discussed strategy. The mental health workers brought similar approach to pre-existing workplace struggle. Beginning in the late 1950s, the Service Employees International Union Local 1199 launched a campaign to unionize the nurses, aides, orderlies, uh, porters, cooks, elevator operators, and laundresses in the city's privately owned nonprofit voluntary hospitals. Disproportionately Black American and Puerto Rican, these workers were vital to the basic operation of New York's hospitals, but were among the city's least paid. The union's groundbreaking campaign combined the fight for civil rights with the demand for economic justice. It culminated in two major strikes in 1959 and 1962 that won unionization, increased wages, limited to 8 the number of daily hours worked, and mandated pay for overtime. Public sector workers, however, remained on the margins of Local 1199's campaign. But with 80% of New York's non-professional hospital staff organized by the late 1960s, the unionization of their counterparts in the public hospitals was on the horizons. When Local 1199 sent its labor organizer, Bernie Minter, to Lincoln Hospital in 1967, he found a cohort of workers who had already begun to organize themselves and whose broad vision of reform he could not easily accommodate. According to one of them, Cleo Silvers, quote, "We wanted to join 1199, and we did eventually, but we wanted the union to take a position against the Vietnam War, against the increased prescription of psychotropic drugs in the neighborhood by Lincoln Mental Health Service, and to support our position that social and economic conditions were detrimental of a person's psychological health. We also wanted the union to back us up on what we had been promised but never got, which was training and upgrading. The union did not look positively on any of this. So from the start, we were seen as renegades. For more than a year thereafter, the mental health workers attempted but failed to persuade the union leadership to press their employer to deliver on the promise of training and upgrading. Tensions in the mental health program intensified in 1969 when OEO funding, which mandated community action, began to dry up. In response to the National Institute for Mental Health, a more traditionally oriented and research-driven psychiatric agency took over funding of programs. This ended the pioneering approach to mental health that the OEO had encouraged. With change in funding source came a shift to a mental health approach that emphasized medicating patients. Activists and progressive doctors, among them Dr. Mike Smith, argued that the dispensation of psychotropic substances in poor Black American and Puerto Rican urban neighborhoods was an attempt at social control. When the mental health workers they were reportedly dismissed. So when the mental health workers asked to meet with the clinic's top administrators to discuss these changes, they were reportedly dismissed with arrogance and contempt. 4 were fired at various stages of the mounting struggle, which workers interpreted as retribution for speaking out. The turning point in the struggle came on March 3rd, 1969. Over 100 non-professional mental health counselors, orderlies, administrative and janitorial staff, mostly people of color, seized the Lincoln facility, evicted director Dr. Harris B. Peck, and high-ranking staff members. The stated purpose of the takeover was to democratize the program's governing structure and force it to meet its stated philosophy of making the community a partner in its own care. As justification for their action, the workers deployed the words of Peck, who in an interview with Reader's Digest March 1969 had said, quote, when there's a foot planted in the seat of my trousers to knock me out of here, I'll know we've succeeded. It will mean that the people want to take over the running of their own community, and that's the way it should be, end quote. I'm gonna let somebody else pick it up.
Okay. I'll take over from here.
I'm available to read also.
Yeah,
You wanna
you
go,
can
Jeff?
go.
Yes. How many more pages do we have? I know the sister said she wanted to read too. Maybe how many more pages we have, and we can break it up. To be
I
fair,
think we've got 2 pages left.
how about
Give me just a
I'll
second
read.
to read the description.
I'll read a page and then let the sister read a page so that we can equally share on this.
Make it a page and a half. We're going to 282. So 3
Okay.
pages.
Alrighty, let's see. The mental health workers were now spearheading efforts for community worker control that grew organically out of their relationship both in the workplace and the community they served, like Black Power. The meaning of application of community control varied depending on the political orientation of those defining it. Conservatives, liberals, and cultural nationalists, excuse me, excuse me, oh shoot, okay, excuse me, measured in its terms of racial representation, that the ethnic composition of those who administer local institutions, schools, hospitals, police precincts, etc., should reflect that of their constituency. To the Lincoln workers, however, community control it involved a reconceptualization of the structure, leadership, and priorities of local institutions. The team of the community mental health workers who took over the clinic operated it for 3 days with the active support staff and liaisons between patients and psychiatrists. Mental health workers had developed relationships with both. They commanded a measure of respect and power. They were therefore unimpeded in their efforts by other doctors and specialists who continued to treat clients during the takeover despite quiet reservations. Workers' grievances included discrimination in hiring and firing, policies, the closure of hold on, I lost it. Oh, the closure of the neighborhood service centers, that the inadequacy of the training and the upgrading program from non-professional employees, and the firing of 4 mental health workers. BPP support work was instrumental during the takeover. The Panthers organized security and brought food and throngs of community supporters. The action was finally shut down at the end of the workday on March 6, when the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, with support of the city's public hospital administration, threatened to suspend specialist licenses for malfeasance and malpractice, and for continuing to render care under the illegitimate administration. Is that a page and a half? I'm not sure. I don't want to go over.
Hey, give me a second to scroll and look at the page number again here. Right. Oh, it must be at the bottom. Goodness.
Or the sister could take over now. The comrade sister could take over if she likes. So That could be fair.
Okay. Go ahead, Kat.
Okay. On my PDF, it has different numbers, so I don't know exactly where we're stopping. So if I go over, just let me know, because it's different page numbers.
Okay.
Thanks. We were at HRUM borrowed its acronym from the Dodge Revolutionary Union Movement, launched in 1968 by Black auto workers in Detroit. Like DRUM,
Uh, I think
HR.
I think you're in the wrong place.
Am I?
Kat, where we're at is this paragraph starting with in the weeks after the March 6th shutdown.
Sorry, I was a page ahead. In the weeks after the March 6th shutdown of the occupation, the mental health workers led a series of rallies and direct actions at the clinic. 23 people were arrested, 41 non-professional workers and 19 professionals, including 3 psychiatrists, were fired, although they were eventually reinstated. The protests, however, were successful in leading to the reinstatement of the 4 Black American mental health workers who had been fired in the year before the takeover. The clinic's directors transfer out of Lincoln, and widespread questioning of the dispensation of psychotropic drugs in the South Bronx. On April 2nd, a month after workers took over the mental health clinic, 21 members of the New York chapter of the BPP were arrested and charged with terrorism. Almost all had been active at Lincoln Hospital during the takeover and subsequent rallies. They included Dr. Curtis Powell, Zaid Shakur, Lumumba Shakur, Rashid Afeni Shakur, Charlene Ify, and Bob Collar. Daruba bin Wahad and Ali Bey Hassan, among others. But non-professional mental health refused to succumb to repression. In the fall of 1969, a network of workers of color formed the Health Revolutionary Unity Movement. They were from New York's Metropolitan Governor and Lincoln Hospitals and the NENA Health Center. Influenced by the struggle at Lincoln and the Black Power movement, radicalized by the Vietnam War, and frustrated by the speed-ups and budget cuts brought on by economic stagnation in the late 1960s, they were among the patches of the American workforce that began to organize independently of union leaderships in this period. Hoping to carry the current political mood into the workplace, young Black and Latino workers organized into insurgent groups. They challenged conservatism among elected union officials, organized opposition to the Vietnam War among their co-workers, and pressured the unions to address structural racism within the union, on the job, and in society at large. HRUM argued that these had to be the priorities of the unions in the health industry. Quote, the unions 1199 and District Council 37, even though progressive in the question of salaries, do not fight against the conditions imposed on the workers nor the quality of the medical services our people are receiving, end quote. Although Local 1199 was conceived as a sole power union, wedded to the political and economic concerns of working people of color, that was supportive of the controversial community control battle and the schools, union officials opposed the bottom-up efforts of workers in the hospital. HRUM borrowed its acronym from the Dodge Revolutionary Union Movement, launched in 1968 by Black auto workers in Detroit. Like DRUM, HRUM called for worker control of workplaces. Unlike DRUM, however, HRUM members joined the Young Lords and Black Panther parties. HRUM's newspaper, For the People's Health, reported that numbers of organizations, quote, live in the same communities where we work, the multiple hospitals, where we see our Black, Puerto Rican, and Chinese brothers and sisters waiting too long and being told, sorry, no bed in this hospital, try another, end quote. HRUM believed strongly in patient advocacy, Its members observed that hospital workers had a dual role as patients and workers, often, quote, often in the same hospital, end quote, and argued that it was the, quote, obligation of every health worker, Black, Puerto Rican, or Chinese, to make sure that our people are given decent health care. If you are a registrar, refuse to collect high fees. If you are a nurse's aide, demand that you have adequate help so that you may perform your duties well, end quote. HRUM protested healthcare's turn to profit and opposed the reduction of services in public hospitals. It also organized around traditional union issues, among them approved wages and working conditions. In its view, class exploitation of workers of color in the hospitals was inseparable from racial oppression shaping conditions in their neighborhoods. With continuity between workplace and community, they reasoned that the hospitals offered a unique venue to address both. Efforts to transform the paradigm, can someone say that for me?
Paradigm.
Thank you. Of healthcare delivery in the mental health clinic at Lincoln, combined with the rise of HRUM and the political vacuum created by the arrest of the Panther 21, set the stage for the Young Lords Party activism at Lincoln a year later in the spring and summer of 1970. Does anyone else want to read?
That is where we are wrapping up for today. Just double check here. Yep. Okay. All right. Well, the floor is open. I'm curious to hear y'all's thoughts about this. I personally love that they kept pushing harder and harder for proper medical care. You know, it's one of the first things that united them to start actually fighting for the community and for there to be equal access to healthcare. And the fact that they got that far of getting activists employed in the hospitals to ensure that people were being represented and their voices being heard is fucking phenomenal. I love it.
Yeah, even with them going through that that really hard interview process and everything they made them go through, like they still stuck it out. So like, go Cleo, Elder
Right.
Cleo, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's one of those.
I think it's telling that the Panther 21 was locked up a month after this takeover. You know what I mean? I think it was like a sign of political repression, their response to, the Black Panthers being a part of this. And they might have was trying to create a wedge, like only focusing in on them. And because even the charges was like insane, blowing up like a botanical garden center, which
botanical garden.
Yeah, it was like a lot of, and I think when Afeni Shakur represented herself, she talked about that. She was like we for the people. Like this don't even make sense. Like even the charges.
Like underground.
Huh?
Like that's weather underground type shit. Like
yeah, and I think this is real telling. Like you know what I mean. Like this was their response to them supporting the community. Like this was all politically motivated around that case. You know, I didn't know about this. I didn't know they got locked up right after supporting the Young Lords on this Lincoln Hospital situation. So yeah.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like retaliation there in part, at least. Them wanting to undercut there actually being, something happening in the movement that is directly affecting the community. Go ahead, Comrade Andy. See, you got your hand up.
Yeah, well, one of the things that strikes me about this is just how serious this was and how close it was to the community. and during that period, a lot of the young college students who were rebelling against the war, they were disconnected in so many ways, even if they came from working class communities. When they were on that campus, that was their main focus. And in a place like New York, where some of the colleges are closely connected to uh, uh, to the hospitals and stuff like that. That's like in Chicago too. A lot of the people who helped the young patriots, for instance, up in the um, clinics up in Uptown, they some of them still around. They were connected to Northwestern College, for instance, and stuff like that. So you got a big urban center, but the vast majority of the so-called youth movement in this country in 1968 and 1969 was kind of off on a hedonistic trip more than anything else. They were tripping and partying, and I mean, they were young and all that, so that you could say that. But this is qualitatively a different kind of organizing that was being done in New York, and it's like it's exactly the kind of thing that we have to learn from. You can't learn too much from the hippie movement,
Yeah.
but you can learn from this, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Comrade Shanti. See, you got your
Uh,
hand up too.
Being in Chicago, born and raised, and proud lover for my city, it's a lot of things that resonate with me with this chapter because I was raised in Inglewood for the first 6 years of my life, and the environmental racism in Inglewood is it's ridiculous. You smell. There will be many times where I have smelled garbage outside of my own house, even inside my own house. When we were living in Inglewood, we were living on 57th and Normal, and we were kind of in the toxic donut part of Inglewood, that main part, and white flight, and the police repression, and the increase of the worsening material conditions in Inglewood. That was really what contributed to the environmental racism in Inglewood getting so bad. And when I moved to Chatham, which was right next to Roseland, which is another large neighborhood of poor new Africans, I would, back in elementary school at my first school, I would, get up and take, the school bus, and they would go to Ashland like the entire trip. So it would be like an hour ride. You smelled garbage. When you get up to like the more industrial part of Chicago, going to Pilsen, like around Pilsen, like you smell garbage and more garbage. That was essentially what it was. And the fact that it was the youth that had their boots on the ground and making these demands show just how bad everything is, because you have to understand the tuberculosis and all the other diseases that were either introduced to us or exacerbated by colonialism. Like, you can put two and two together. um and the fact that they were in terrible material conditions, in terrible housing that they have no destiny or agency over, being under the landlords and stuff like that, like it made the problem even worse. And that's the same thing that's still happening in Chicago. You have the environmental racism in Inglewood, and you have General Iron in South Chicago, which is largely indigenous Chicanos. You have um Al Algeld Gardens on the very far south side, and other places in Chicago, including Little Village, There was a construction mishap if you can even call it that, that happened, I believe, in 2021. And there was a lot of toxic dust that went around Little Village, which once again is indigenous Chicanos. So this is, the fact that, ecology and class and the bourgeois system, they play a big role in it. You can't separate the three. And so, you know, they also, Roseland also had, I believe, a syphilis outbreak at the beginning of this year, I believe. And that shows you just how our our terrible material conditions created by capitalism exacerbates the diseases and the sicknesses that were introduced to us, and we have no control over our care. We have to go to these terrible hospitals, these multi-million-dollar hospitals, even if we asked for them, even if we did put our boots down for a decade to have a center open, because we did do that with the University of Chicago. I think that was going on for about 5, 6 years, about a decade, because of the gun violence, once again, from capitalism, that was having a large desert in hospitals, for gunshot victims. And we fought, they fought for that for about a decade. And, they opened up, a trauma center, but even still is not enough, because once again, this is a higher institution that we're talking about, an institution that we have no control over, that the proletariats have no control over. Mind you, Chicago is the city of the 11 proletariats. So that class divide is very, very apparent here. And not to mention, the Panther 21 that supported the Young Lords, and then out of the blue, they have plans to bomb a botanical garden and shoot every pig they see. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's Weather Underground shit. They would never think that. How you even heard Fred Hampton vehemently disgrace the Weather Underground because they were opportunistic. The New York Panthers were not that. They were not that. Afeni Shakur, all those people, they were not. They were not about that. They were about principle. But once again, it's about creating that rift between colonized youth in order to suppress and neutralize us. And thankfully, the young lords who are, youth, young people, us, we put our boots down and we got the most basic changes that are at least beneficial for not only the Boricuas of South Bronx, but also for the Africans in South Bronx and other lumpen proletariats in South Bronx, because the conditions were that terrible. And the lead poisoning, that really resonated with me because I was a victim of lead poisoning myself when I was a baby. So I absolutely understand it. Once again, the environmental racism in Inglewood, you have disproportionate rate of cancer, and you have lead poisoning and other illnesses that are made and exacerbated by capitalism, by the bourgeois system. And that really, really resonated with me. And this is, a 19-year-old saying this. So that shows you like just how long it has been, and it's even still going. We're still fighting with these corporations, with these big entities, to stop certain things, because it's making our communities sick. We're getting sick. We're getting cancer. I have asthma, so I've definitely been in that. So like this really, really resonates with me because the fact that it was young people once again putting their boots down on the ground, going to these institutions, demanding, and not only demanding, but requiring and making the steps necessary for these basic changes that are largely beneficial for their community. Like it's very, very telling just how deep the problems were back then and still are today.
Yeah, I mean, help look, we're seeing cases of lead poisoning in Newark, as well as, you know, in Flint. We're seeing uprise of these totally preventable and treatable diseases in Florida right now that they're going, holy fuck, there's basically a plague happening in Florida. And all of it speaks to just how much capitalism has failed people when it comes to the healthcare system being treated as a capitalist venture instead of something that's supposed to serve the people.
Right. Like we have to pay for our right to care that is not even, that is low, that is substandard and could possibly kill us. Like we have to go to these institutions to pay for our right to care. It's, you know, it's ridiculous. But once again, this is the conditions that we are in. So we do have to tackle them.
Absolutely, because these things shouldn't be fucking commodified. They're
Right.
human rights. Comrade Cat, I see you got your hand up. Go ahead, hon.
Yeah, I was just gonna add on with Comrade Shanti, I have lupus, but lupus is most affected by Black and brown women. There's no cure for lupus, and it's one of the least researched autoimmune diseases out there, and it affects Black and brown women like much higher percentage than anyone else that has it. And the only thing that's been linked and proved is how in your environmental how you were your environment and how you were brought up. They've linked it to more oppressed communities and oppressed people having lupus. And that's one of the few things about lupus that they know for sure is a fact and been proven. And I just wanted to say, and that's still a struggle today. It being one of the least researched, at least one of the least funded, and Black and brown women are the ones that most suffer from them. It's pretty sad.
It is indeed. It speaks to environmental racism. Straight up.
Yeah.
Like, and especially when we see that these corporations are not just being allowed, but encouraged to do all of their hazardous, toxic waste dumping in areas that are predominantly people of color living in the vicinity. And it's like, what the fuck? If you're not willing to dump this shit in the suburbs, what makes you think it's okay to dump it in poorer neighborhoods? What the fuck? What the actual fuck? It's ridiculous. We need to address these things in a systematic way of actually addressing toxic waste being allowed to be produced by these corporations, but also how we treat it afterwards, and for these companies to not be allowed to use that as an environmental factor in places where people live. Period. Shouldn't matter if you are in a predominantly white neighborhood, a predominantly Black neighborhood. You are a human being. You have the fucking right to not be exposed to toxic waste that is a detriment to your health. Comrade Andy, I see you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things that I found out, when I moved to West Virginia was that the whole idea of like even there the environmental racism was going on, even though everybody was generally poor, that the people who lived the closest to the chemical plants in a lot of cases were small Black communities. But the overall conditions, we did there was a leak down where I lived of MIC, which was the stuff that killed all the people in Bhopal, India. Well, that leak went first out around a mostly Black state college area. And then everybody started realizing that we're all involved in this, that this kind of stuff, chlorine gas. I lived in a small, it was an all-white little village out there in the rural area, and I went to sit with a family. You know, we went to talk and meet them when we first got there. We were living in a trailer, and they showed us home movies and slides of their, you know, their life around there. And all of a sudden, there's a slide of all these dead horses in the field, right behind the school where my kids were going to school. I said, "What the hell is this?" And they said, "Well, that was when the tanker tipped over and all the chlorine gas went all over the field, killed every horse in the field. Everybody got evacuated out of town." What's happening in this country as the infrastructure is destroyed, the 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 poison is falling on everybody. It's so that there are points of unity in the environmental struggle that we have to be really quick to recognize. Like Flint is a good example because there is it's a very mixed community. I I know some of the leaders in Flint uh, who were on the ground right from the beginning, and it's a very mixed group, mixed nationality that we see that the degradation of the environment as the post-industrialization and the Rust Belt really grinds us further and further down. It's within that context that the unity of the class is actually possible. As long as that dumb guy thinks he's better than somebody else, you know, then the unity ain't possible. He gets to live half a mile away from the worst place. No, the unity becomes possible now like never before. And in fact, we as revolutionaries have to seize on that as being the principal aspect to pull this thing together. So yeah, it's a very rapidly deteriorating situation. It's not just the political empire, but it's the fact that they're done with large sections of the working class. They're done with a lot of the old industrial areas. They don't give a shit what happens to them. There's places out in Kansas that were lead mining areas that are complete ghost towns. Everybody's dead or gone, you know. And this is the same thing out in the Southwest with the uranium mines, you know, around the Navajo. And all these kinds of things are what we have to seize on as commonalities to our class so that we can bring a force together that can change things. Because if we fight it out on like divisive lines, like your your situation is worse than mine, mine's worse than yours, that kind of a thing, we won't be able to come together. And it's critical that we come together around exactly these things. This is a really strong chapter. Again, I'm real impressed with this book because it's straight up and it's very clear and very practical lessons that these revolutionaries learned.
Absolutely. Yeah, with the things that were happening in Flint, a lot of people don't know, like before it even became national public knowledge about the lead poisoning, we were already in severe water crisis for many years prior to that.
Mhm.
Like there was constant water boil advisories. Like I lived on the east side of Flint for many years, and most of the time the water was unusable for anything other than like doing laundry or flushing the toilet. We were, you know, surviving on bottled water for a long fucking time because it just wasn't safe to drink it. There was constantly bacterial blooms in the water. There was stuff that I don't even fucking know what all was in it because, you know, it's not like we had funding to be taking water samples to get tested and find out what is this gunk coming out of my faucet. It was only after the switch, which was against the will of the people, the switch to the Flint River as our water source while waiting for the new pipeline to be built, that the corrosive toxins that were in the Flint River started eating away at the pipes and leaching lead into it, that it finally, brought enough attention of like, hey, there's a really serious issue here. But for decades, that water has been tainted. That's why there's bans there. You cannot have a well at all because the groundwater is tainted thanks to GM, Buick City, all of them dumping toxic waste on their grounds, and it's seeping into the groundwater. And you bring up a valid point there too. In Flint, it is a predominantly Black community living within city limits, but there's also a lot of Chicanos, a lot of whites, and it didn't matter what color you were. Everybody got exposed to this shit because no matter which part of town you lived in, you were next to a source of hazardous fucking waste.
Right.
They, did not give a single shit about how that affects the health of the people there. And on top of it, we were also dealing with issues as far as access to proper health care and not enough funding for our local hospitals to even be able to handle this. It was a huge clusterfuck. And many people have died, and many more are permanently disabled now because of even skin exposure to that water, of having to bathe in it.
Profit.
Mhm.
Profit. That's it. That's
Yes,
it. It's literally not rocket science to understand this. This has been international news for over a decade, and we're still figuring out what's going on. What's the root causes? Y'all know the root causes. All these corporations in our community sucking us dry, leaving us permanently disabled, killing us. Like, y'all know the root causes. Y'all just don't want to deal with it. Like, come on.
Honestly, I think they encourage it because that's been part of the gentrification, not just in Flint, but in other similar situations in other cities, where once you poison the people enough where they're like, fuck, we don't have a choice but to try to figure some way out to live somewhere where we're not getting constantly exposed to this and made sick, then their properties go up for sale for dirt fucking cheap for these corporations to swoop right the fuck in and buy that property up dirt cheap and swallow it up into another one of their industrial sites.
Like that's literally what's going on in Chicago. That's literally what happened in Chicago with Humboldt Park, with Record Park, with Inglewood, and other communities where colonized people do make up the majority. It's literally class warfare.
Yes.
Once again, this is class warfare. Like, we have been going tooth and nail at these corporations and at these people for years, for many, many years here, especially in Chicago. Like, Chicago is like one of the prime examples of understanding the correlation between capitalism and health. Chicago, Flint, Detroit, what else? Los Angeles, Houston, the DNA people, Florida, Newark. Like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand where the problem is coming from. We know where the problem is coming from. It's capitalists. It's the capitalists coming in and literally trying to squeeze out as many people as they could until we're no longer exploitable enough to even like fight back against them, to even live like at least regularly. And then we're discarded. They come into our neighborhoods when they see the damage. I was like, okay, now we gotta buy up the neighborhood. They raise the rent, push us out, and add these Once again, these terrible pieces of architecture that don't even blend well with the neighborhood at all. But that's the point. It's a whole cycle. That's why lumping is that word, because it's capitalism's disposables. We are disposables. The people of Flint are essentially disposables, even if they're not a worker. You know what I'm saying? The children, the babies, the infants that are being affected by the toxins and lead, in the water, once we're no longer exploitable, once we're sick enough, then, we're discarded. That's literally why lumping has this name, because we can be exploitable at any given time in any given place. It doesn't matter, if you're in the worst material conditions or even in the, so-called best material conditions. It doesn't matter because it means that you can be deemed unexploitable next. That's literally what it means. We're still facing it to this day. Once again, it does not take a rocket scientist to understand this. It couldn't.
Right.
It shouldn't take a decade to understand where the problems are coming from. It's capitalism. That's it. That's it. There's literally no one else. There's no one else. There's no other oppressed group of people that are causing the toxins to grow exponentially in the water. I mean, can we look at the elephant in the room for once?
Right. Right. Precisely. Because in pursuit of their profits, they allowed these companies that used to be a source of employment for a lot of people that had Flint as a flourishing city for many decades now become a toxic cesspool that's fucking unlivable in most parts of it. And sure, there's a couple spots where they've started bioremediation, like down at Chevy in the Hole, but most of it is still absolutely unlivable. Of you're being exposed to that shit still. What they've done at Chevy in the Hole, they need to go do over at the old AC Delco shop on Dordt Highway. They need to go do at the other former GM plants, the old Buick City, because those areas are still fucking unlivable. But are they going to do it? No, because it doesn't serve their profit margin.
It
Comrade
doesn't.
Kwame, I see you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, on page 275, it's a couple statistics that like stood out to me. One, it said Lincoln's 350 bed facility was charged with caring for a catchment area of approximately 500,000 people. Not surprisingly, the facility was so overcrowded and the bed shortages so severe that patients were often treated in corridors. You know what I mean? Like that, there wasn't even enough institutions over there to take care of the needs of a population of that size in that area. You know what I mean? I think another statistics paragraph up, it said the South Bronx had the highest rate of heroin addiction in the world. You know what I mean? This is the backdrop of all this. You know what I mean? The overcrowding, the conditions dealing with tuberculosis, the incidence of syphilis and gonorrhea being 6 and 4 times the national average. You know what I mean? We already heard about the garbage. Like I like when we was reading about the garbage offensive, I was like, how in the fuck can a city allow like it to be that unsanitary? But you know what? This is the crazy thing about like going around the different regions in the United States even today. You know what I'm saying? Like when I went out there to Newark, New Jersey and stayed out there for a couple months. We was in a city, like we're in the downtown area and garbage was like everywhere. Like I've never been except Philadelphia. So I think Philadelphia was a little bit more filthy and stuff. But just think about this. It's like the downtown area. You know what I mean? And it was filth and garbage and trash everywhere. So when I be thinking about like reading these type of statistics and some of these background, the overcrowding, that's another thing I realize about the East Coast. Like they stacking people on top of each other. Like and the cost of living is so much higher. Like you can get like an apartment, and that apartment is like damn near $2,000. You know what I mean?
For a one
And
bedroom.
yeah, and they're not making a lot of money. You in the first place with all these background conditions. I think that's like real admirable that the young lords took on some of these social issues head on. And because all the people was affected by these conditions, like tuberculosis, the health situation, the lack of facilities, uh, going on in the affecting the community, the garbage problem, the lead problem. You know what I'm saying? I think that those were social contradictions, like that was right to bring a lot of people into the movement, because these are the conditions that affect their everyday life. And I think this is the highlight of this book. Like I think that we have to take away from here. You know, in certain revolutionary movements, people have all type of different ways of thinking how we supposed to organize the community. You know, sometimes a lot of people think it's about marching, doing speeches and stuff like that, but that's really misses the mark. It's the stuff behind the scenes like this. You know what I mean? That's
Yeah, 100%.
issues. You know what I'm saying? That affect everyday people that just want some type of mechanism or an institution or a vehicle to help them address those issues and resolve those issues in their life. You know what I'm saying? So I just wanted to emphasize that. I think that's like the essence that we should take away from reading these chapters about the young Lord. It's not like, you know, I talk about Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, but that's not the everyday language of the average person out here in the streets. You know, we can teach them that by participation and observation and participation. You know what I'm saying? Connecting with them on the issues that affect their everyday life. You know what I'm saying? That's going to start to get them to question the system, why this system is like it is. You know what I'm saying? We have to make revolutionary leaps in theory. You know what I'm saying? But on a building relationships with the community, we can't shoot over their head. You know what I'm saying? We just have to start where they at. You know what I mean? That's the lesson. That's the heart of the lesson in this book that we're reading, that we have to take away from this. No matter how much we get advanced in our theoretical analysis, we have to understand like the practical use to this in order for people to get to that theoretical stage of understanding it on a deeper level. And that's the starting point. That's the first relationship that has to be built. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It takes those conversations with people about what their direct material conditions are and the shit they're having to contend with right there in their own neighborhood to revolutionize their minds. You can break down the big words and broader terms at a later point. What matters is starting that conversation with going, okay, what is the shit fuckery you are dealing with right here that needs to be resolved to improve your quality of life for the people in your neighborhood to have a dignified life? Because so long as you were constantly being exposed to toxic water, toxic waste, every fucking where around you, you are not having a quality of life, a dignified life. You're dealing with the shit end of the stick of capitalism's fucking leftovers.
Yeah. And this the icing on the cake. You see almost everything they're doing, they're bringing it back and turning it into survival programs. You know what I'm saying? And they're trying to institutionalize this. You know what I'm saying? Like the healthcare, they're trying to institutionalize this to tuberculosis testing. They're trying to institutionalize this where this is a thing that the community can be a part of, but it's also addressing the needs of the community. You know what I'm saying? So it has, even when it talks about the hospital, and they was talking about bringing the workers there are uh the nurses and everything like that, their staff, but they're also what's the other word they use? It's basically understanding that you have to look at, even being working at a hospital, you're a worker, but you also like damn, I forget what it was saying.
It said it was a patient, right?
Patient, right? Like, it's looking at them as patient and a worker. Like, we have to have healthy staff. We have to honor the fact of their conditions. They're under they don't have enough help as far as shortage of staff to help them. You know what I'm saying? Like, they understood that you have to build this from the ground up. That's why even the union started having problems with it, because they was like, y'all trying to reverse like the capitalist way of doing shit. You know what I'm saying? So they bucked into that. You know what I'm saying? So again, my point is this: is that not only meeting the social, addressing the social conditions and material conditions that we face, but also turning them into survival programs like what Huey talked about. This is not necessarily revolutionary, and it's not necessarily reform. It's surviving pending revolution, but it's doing it in such a way where we're doing, like Mal said, applying the mass line. You're getting the people involved. You're hearing the people's ideals. And then you're institutionalizing it and having the people drawn in where they become a part of this, where they feel this is their community. You know what I mean? Right now, nobody feels this is their community out here. You know what I mean? We're not engaged in such a way where we control all these institutions within our immediate community. But this is like the goal. This is what we're trying to, organize around and get towards in our organizing efforts.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I gotta look. Let's see, where are we? Oh, yeah. Could I speak to that one thing about this? There was a lot of emphasis on this about the mental health crisis in these different communities, trauma and stuff like that, which we see all the time. I mean, in Chicago, we go to these places. I know, like I think I've mentioned, I know about 20 mothers who have lost their children to the gun violence, and we counsel with them, and we organize with them. But the thing about this is that the city don't want to be in the business of caring for the people anymore. You know, I mean, if they never did, but now it's like they've closed the mental health clinics in the most screwed up and oppressed communities. The most disenfranchised communities had little mental health clinics that people relied on. They closed them, and they closed the schools. They're closing the institutions that serve the poorest of the poor. And then it's just like it's a food desert. It's a mental health hellhole. It's all these things, and then they wonder why people don't act right or something like that. But the places are crawling with cops, but the clinics are closed. The thing that they tried to do, they brought this Dr. Morita. She came to Chicago under Rahm Emanuel expressly as a hatchet person to close the mental health clinics. I was working with some mental health advocates and patients at the time, and what they want to do is put it all on remote so that you sit home and watch a YouTube video about, or some interactive Zoom meeting where, oh, well, yeah, go ahead, tell me your problems, but I don't want to be in the same room with you. This is sort of like a mass McDonaldization of mental health care at the exact point when everything is going to hell in the society, and people are every day I walk out the door, go on the bus, people are losing their shit out there. I mean, literally raving in the street. And I'm like going, whoa, whoa, I better I better get on the other side of the street. I better get my old ass over there. Cause I don't know what this fucker over here is gonna do. And it's like that all over the place. And so like as the trauma increases, as the breakdown takes place, they're abandoning us. And we have to find the people who are still healthy enough to become revolutionaries. I mean, seriously, that's they've all they do is dump alcohol and drugs on this section of the population. And we have to go into these troubled places and find the people, the young people particular, who are able to be educated and be able to be revolutionized. I think Kwame's exactly right. There was a demonstration here in Chicago or somewhere close by where they got these dumbass country singers, and the one did that not in a little town or not in a small town or something. So these guys go out and they do a protest at that, and they burn American flags, whatever. And so the headlines are, communist protest, small town America, or communist, raise hell at the Jason Aldean show. It's like,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
I remember that.
yeah, but that we don't get the headline. Communists go out and seize clinic and open it up for the people, or they want to marginalize us, and like Shanta was saying, like the Fred Hampton pointed out, like the weathermen exactly played into that kind of a trap, and they weren't the ones who ended up paying for it. It was Fred Hampton who got murdered, not them. Bernadine Dorn and Bill Ayers are sitting nice and pretty in a big old house up on the north side of Chicago. So what we have to do is deepen, like Kwame said, we have to go deep into the communities, into these hurting places, and build our case there, build our organization there. We can't be out there, acting a fool at this point in history. It ain't going to advantage us at all.
No, no. And that's exactly the thing. The city of Chicago has never been for anyone. They have never saved us. I am so sorry. They have never ever showed up for any of us. Even when Harold Washington, was mayor, they were not afraid. But once again, it's Native people's fault. It's the children's fault. It's the youth's fault. It's everyone else's fault, but not the bourgeois system. We're literally becoming lumpens every single day. It gets worse. The only thing that they need to do is just pit us against each other, and they will accomplish what they have been doing for the past 531 years. As long as we don't, put our foot down and make these survival systems, as long as we don't politically educate ourselves to get us back to reality, then we will continue once again to collapse under it. Once again, the city of Chicago has never done anything for anybody. Like, did y'all forget about Cabrini Green that quick? Did y'all really forget about Cabrini Green that quick? But no, it's other people's fault. It's our fault. Okay. Keep lying to yourself, because what's going to happen is you're going to lie yourself to an early grave. That's exactly what's going to happen. They're already doing that with you, and you don't even know. No matter how much you show your so-called privilege, is there really such thing as privilege under a system that is making more and more of us lumpens by the day, and actually making our conditions so terrible that we're literally psychologically and mentally cracking? because that's literally what's happening. We're mentally cracking under it. We cannot hold it in any longer because there's been no system put in place for so long. We're literally losing our mind out here. It's like we couldn't hold it in anymore. We put our heads in the sand for so long, and we're cracking under it because now it's all coming back to bite us. All that ignoring, all of that getting help from these petty bourgeois fucks, like now we're paying the price for it. It's catching up to us. Once again, we're becoming lumpins more and more by the day. The children, now it's everyone involved. Now it's not just one sector of oppressed people. Now it's everyone. Okay? And the fact of the matter is we need to build these systems. We need to go deep in our own communities to build it from the ground up, because we haven't had these systems for so long, and we have been just so fixated in just either ignoring it or going to the bourgeoisie for help. And help, where did help get us? Where exactly did help get us? It gave us more. It gave us more sexual violence. It gave us more capitalist-driven drugs. It gave us more alcohol. It gave us more tainted tobacco, which came from indigenous people in the islands, by the way. But once again, it's not the bourgeois problem. It's not the bourgeoisie's problem. It's the migrants' problem. It's the children's problem. It's other people's problem. The longer we keep thinking that, you're going to actually end up dead, because that's exactly what they're doing. What they don't need to have SWAT teams in our communities. All they need to do is just put it in the news. As long as we don't know how to politically educate ourselves, this is what they're going to do. And it's only going to get worse as long as we don't do it now to build that community understanding. Because if we don't, we're going to continue to collapse under it. And our ancestors will be deeply ashamed of us for not fighting hard enough. We're not our ancestors. Harriet Tubman will be very, very disappointed. Zapata will be very, very disappointed in all you guys, in all of us, because we're better than that. We're better than that. We know that. It's just that willpower that's been stripped from us for so long. We don't know what the hell we're doing. That's why. That's also why Cop City, why the Cop City movement bombed. Because once again, it got too visible. It was on some Weather Underground type shit with all those petty bourgeois European Americans coming up north, coming from up north and over west to New Africa, and literally, like, we don't know what the fuck we're doing. It grew too quick. It became too visible. And now we have 60 people indicted because of opportunism. We cannot have that in our communities. This is not 1969 anymore. This is not 1969 anymore. We need to really, really build it from the ground up. We need to hear Fred's voice. We have to hear Mao's voice so that we know what the hell we're doing without putting every single strategy all out there, because that's how we ended up here also. That's why more of us are becoming lumpen proletariats by the day, because we don't know what we're doing. We're just operating by what our eyes see. We cannot operate by what our eyes see. We cannot build a revolution without education first, without going into our communities. That's why the Flint water crisis is still happening. That's why New Palestine, Ohio happened. That's why our infrastructure, our non-existent infrastructure is failing. Because we don't know how to put our foot down. We don't know how to speak up. We don't know how to go into our community and actually work with where we are collectively at. And that needs to change now, because the longer we don't know what we're doing and the longer that we continue to blame the wrong people, there will be less people to actually have a hand in the revolution. And the people that we're trying to get will either be so deep in their escapist doomist complex that, you know, we're screwed.
Yeah. One thing I like that and y'all was just speaking to it, like the healthcare, and they brought up the mental health. This the side of mental health that a lot of people don't see. A lot of those, when they start closing, and this is a response to the Black Liberation Movement, response to the 60s and 70s, when we fought for some of these things, you know what I mean? And you can get these things and then they can take them right back from you when you don't control them, you know what I mean? And when they took the mental health institutions out of our community, a lot of these people started going to prison. When I was in prison, like the mental health population is large in prison. You dig what I'm saying? When I was on the Supermax unit in Indiana called the SHU, half the people on that unit were mentally ill people. You know what I'm saying? And the guards weren't even trained to deal with them. They was only trained to deal with them using repression, running in their cell, beating them up, shooting them up with more drugs and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? But this is the response when we don't have a revolution and they start taking these revolutionary institutions and out of our community. This is the response. So a lot of the stuff we fought for in the past, they're taking away. Like we even see how they try to take away Social Security and all kind of other stuff. You know what I'm saying? That came out of the 60s. You know what I'm saying? So that's one aspect. But I'm gonna go back to this other aspect, like the heroin addiction and the drug addiction. That's a part of mental health as well. Alcohol addiction, a lot of that comes from like the alienation from capitalism. Number one, like people deal with that and it affects them in so many different ways. Like a lot of people dealing with depression, a lot of people dealing with suicidal feelings and thoughts and stuff. I will also emphasize what I've been talking about a lot, like in social media, I call post-traumatic colonial disorder, like the effects of colonialism on people. Like, why are so many colonized people, why do they put the liquor stores in these communities? This is a way to psychotrophically keep them sedated. For real. And this is why like a lot of the drug proliferation in these oppressed communities is high. But not only, but these go hand in hand again with the alienation of capitalism. When I got out, I had a girlfriend that she used to do the Medicare, Medicaid stuff. So I used to take people to their doctor appointments. Don't you know, majority of doctor appointments I had was taking people to the clinic so they could get Suboxones. Like most of these people were strung out on heroin and stuff. You know what I'm saying? Now we got even worse stuff like fentanyl out here. You know what I mean? This is all a part of a counterinsurgency. You know what I'm saying? Against the working class and the lumpen proletariat class population. When I watched the documentary on El Chapo, and I realized he was working with the DEA, and 80% or 90% of the drugs that El Chapo was shipping in the United States, it was going to Chicago. Why? Why Chicago? But what was Chicago in the 60s though? They had to make sure that city don't ever rise up like that again. So this is part of this class struggle against us. You know what I'm saying? So these are all things going forward, you know, as we start to build these institutions, these survival programs, we have to think about, because we're going to have to take mental health as a real necessary priority within the revolutionary struggle. You know what I'm saying? Because If we don't deal with the crisis of alienation of capitalism and the post-traumatic colonial disorders that a lot of people are dealing with, we're going to lose a lot of people to drugs and alcohol abuse and overdoses and stuff. You know what I'm saying? So this is a part of it. And giving people meaning within a revolutionary struggle, that gives them a sense of their existence being worthwhile, where they don't have to sedate themselves just to escape this world. Because that's what it is. It's a lot of escapism. You know what I mean? A lot of that is escapism because they feel their social being is meaningless within the context of capitalism. This is what Marx was talking about, the alienation of capitalism. You know what I'm saying? So I just wanted to throw that out there.
I got a quick reply to that, and then Sister Shanti, you can have the floor. A few points. Like, we already knew that the government was involved when it came to the mass distribution of crack cocaine and heroin in this country, and they could feasibly, and I'll put that in very loose quotes there, try to blame, you know, the cartels and all of that for this influx of drugs coming in. But on the fentanyl tip, there is one and only one fucking source from that. That is not something that you can derive from a plant like you can with heroin. The one and only source for fentanyl is the fucking pharmaceutical industry, period. And we are seeing fentanyl being put in every fucking thing now, even the fucking bathtub meth. So where the fuck is all that coming from? You can't sit here and try to deny that the system is not involved in the mass proliferation of fucking fentanyl in every fucking drug you can find and get your hands on. I have friends who have even been poisoned by it being put on their fucking marijuana. So, you know, that's a clear red flag on the fucking playing field that the system itself, the government and the motherfucking pharmaceutical industry is a part of that. And going back to what you said about like the drugs that they're using to address heroin addiction and fentanyl addiction, those things are even more fucking addictive. And it's a vicious cycle where they are continuously profiting off of every fucking facet of it, causing the drug pandemic, the drug epidemic, and then being like, oh, we have a cure for this. Fund it. Give us a bunch of fucking money for that. Comment Shanti, you have the floor. And then General Cap.
Yeah, yeah, especially the crack crisis in Chicago, because my mom is 52 now, so she grew up in that era, and it was, once again, it was devastating. I mean, it literally swallowed up entire generations, entire neighborhoods, largely of African proletariats. You know what I'm saying? They, you know, Michael Tabor in Capitalism Plus Dope Equals Genocide talks about this. That's literally your answer in Capitalism Plus Dope Equals Genocide. That is your answer. And once again, you know, once we're mentally strung out, you know, so far out, they put us in these quote unquote psych institutions, which are concentration camps. Let's call a thing here. You know, like the hotline, you know, that hotline to give to the police. That's essentially means to go to another concentration camp, just like the schools, just like the colleges, just like the prisons. It's the exact same thing. We did not make progress with that. Please stop deluding yourself with that. We did not make progress. We made progress with fine-tuning eugenics. That's what we did. If you really want to know the truth, all these substances, all of these drugs and alcohol that has been used as weaponry against our people, especially in the crack crisis. I mean, what other source is there? What other source is there? Even in Capitalism Plus Dope Equals Genocide, they talked about how the police The pigs of all people would plant those drugs in other people's apartments that they would raid to look for quote unquote evidence. They plant the evidence most of the time. That's the point. And with the heroin epidemic that the work came from, because it came out around the height of that, like the year before the so-called war on drugs was officially proclaimed. The heroin epidemic was extremely just devastating, not only to African children, but also to Boricua children as well, including those of African heritage. Like the fact that it was largely in lumpen conditions shows that this is indeed more beyond a class struggle. Okay, like this is a non-negotiable. Like the fact that we ignore the implications of capitalism within discussions of mental health shows just how far deep it goes. And the fact that a lot of us still celebrate the fact that we made progress somehow with these hotlines, even though they're going straight to the police, knowing that the police will use it against us, knowing what the police are, knowing the history of the police. Really? You really want to celebrate eugenics right now? Because there's nothing to celebrate. The heroin epidemic is eugenics. The crack crisis is eugenics. Eugenics plays a big role in mental health, especially in our communities. It does. It does. It does. Just look around you. It doesn't take a book of theory to understand that. There are a lot of people that should be worthy of living. But once again, it creates, once again, into Bora's work, the poverty, the conditions are so terrible and so disgusting that these people think that there's no real place for them in the world, no real place for them to be loved, to be protected, to even live. Essentially, they feel like there's no way out. So essentially, they become the deemed unexploitable to capitalism that way, and they will go to whatever substance they could find that capitalism promotes and puts in our communities to not feel it, to not feel the effects of poverty, to not deal with anything, to not deal with the feelings of it, to just feel that poisonous high, to not deal with reality. That's essentially the thing with the crack crisis as well. It's a big prime example of that. And those effects are still reverberating in our communities, to this day, especially with the 1994 crime bill. Like, that's why mental health is extremely important, especially in political education. That is why mental health is extremely important in revolution, why mental health is important in self-determination, in sovereignty, in liberation. Because once again, we feel that under these conditions that there's no way out. So we have to find some way in order to not deal with the feelings of it. And either we end up permanently disabled or we end up dying from it. And this is exactly what is happening now. That's why we have to have that mental health piece in political education, in these things, because if we don't, then we're leaving out a huge chunk in how eugenics and capitalism play a big role in our oppression to this day. We cannot leave that out. You cannot leave that out, because if you do, then what's the point of even educating our people when they're mentally suffering, when they're psychologically suffering, when they're literally physically cracking under the height of capitalism. You cannot separate it.
You really can't. And I like the way Kwame put that a few minutes ago of the post-colonialism stress disorder, because it really fucking is. Capitalism itself causes how many of us severe anxiety? The compounding effects of multiple facets of fucking trauma, of just trying to survive in this shit. Most mental health issues that people are contending with right now are because we live under fucking capitalism and all of its exploitation that stresses us into being fucking non-functional, and in many cases to the point of fucking disabled because of it. It's really fucked. General Secretary Kat, I see you got your hand up too. I know you got some excellent feedback on this one with the boots you've put on the ground addressing these issues.
Well, not really. I just wanted to point out that it's the pharmaceutical company with like human drugs, but we have to think when fentanyl was designed for animals. So like it's also the veterinarian pharmaceutical companies. Their companies, they're big into that, and they do source a lot of fentanyl being put on the ground. And as a harm reductionist with lived experience, I have to say that yes, Suboxone and methadone clinics aren't the answer, and they can be addicting, but they are also something that gives a lot of people hope, and they're not meant to stay on life. That's a lot of people have the problem with staying on too long. It's just to help you get off of them. And when you stay on too long, and that's where it creates really big problems. And our corporations and the pharmaceutical companies allow us to stay on them that long when we shouldn't be. And yes, I do agree that's a problem. But I just wanted to say we have to be conscious of how we say those things, just so, when it comes to addiction, that yes, they are harmful, but if you know how to do them right and you have a good support team and stuff, that they can help you get off drugs if you do it the right way. And I just wanted to say that.
I agree. And my criticism there wasn't of anybody who was fighting with addiction and going to those clinics to seek help. My criticism is of the system itself, because they are financially incentivized to keep people on those as long as possible and causing just another addiction in turn, rather than using it as a process to wean off of opiates like it was intended to be and supposed to be.
Yeah, I definitely didn't think you were saying that, comrade sister. I just wanted to clarify it away of like that, because I even said it is the pharmaceutical companies doing that, and the fact that they don't even put you on it when you're supposed to. You have to be all the way clean, 72 hours at least, to even get into one of those clinics. And
So
that's
first.
if you can get into a place that will even let you detox, because now liability wise, you can't come in there unless you're done through the worst 72 hours of your detox. They won't even admit you. So that's a big struggle too. And that's why a lot of people, because they have to do it themselves before they can go get treatment. So
that's absolutely fucking horrible and inhumane, because the hardest part of getting off of opiates is those few days of detox. Just even speaking from personal experience, because with the spinal cord injuries that I have, my doctors fed me full of opiates for years. At one point, I had fentanyl patches on my arm and had shit like Lortab thousands to take for breakthrough pain, because it still was not enough to control the pain. And I had to go through that detox on my own. And I mean, this might work for some people, might not work for others. I'll be straight up honest about it. The way I was able to get through that was disappearing into the woods, going camping for a few days with a big ass fucking bag of magic mushrooms to hit the fucking reset button as hard as I could, and be able to deal with the physical symptoms of that without losing my shit. So, after 15, almost 16 years of them treating me like a fucking lab rat and pumping me full of opiates to try to control that pain, I said enough. Fucking enough, because I didn't want to be another statistic after watching all the people who I have seen in my personal life, my circle of friends, die from all of these various drugs. I didn't want to join them 6 feet under. And I had no options like that because of the system operating like that. I never got any assistance from any of those programs because at that point I was like, okay, the medical system's already fucking failed me in the most epic fucking manners. And I could not turn to that. I had to do it all my fucking self. And that is horrendous that so many people are being put in that position. There should at least be something set up where you have a detox center for people to come to be able to be supported through the detox phase so they can even make it to the treatment phase.
Yeah, they do have those. They have those places, and you have to have about $3,000 a week to get into them. I mean, the wealthy drug addict or whatever is got plenty of options. All the musicians, who've been pulled out that had been on the verge of death, and they got their fat pulled out of the fire, and they go off to, like Amy Winehouse probably should have. But those kinds of situations are expressly unequal. And one of the things I wanted to bring up is like they've proven recently, like with lab rats, that if you put a lab rat group under a high stressful situation and give them an option of regular drinking water or water like laced with drugs or alcohol or something, that the rat will constantly feed off of the one that gives them some kind of sedation or some kind of stimulus. But if you create an environment where the lab rat has other lab rat friends, and he's got a really nice wheel and plenty of food and stuff like that, they take themselves off of it. So the environment that capitalism creates couldn't be worse for getting people strung out. I mean, we've all had friends who died this way. Good people. You couldn't organize them when they were high. You couldn't get anywhere with them. It's like it's futile. But the fact that they were good people, they could have been part of the army of liberation, but instead they were taken out. That's by design. That this system does not want people who they can't exploit. So if you're somebody who has like problems with the system, when I first got involved in politics, we went to, as a class project, we went to a mental institution in Columbus, Ohio, filled with young people. And I started interviewing these young people. They were all my peers. And I said, "How did you get in there?" This kid said, "Well, I did an expose of my parents. My parents are very wealthy, and I put their story in the underground newspaper at Ohio State, and they had me committed." I mean, the system will not tolerate anything that doesn't go right along with it, lock, stock, and barrel. So you got to be a true believer, and don't be shaky at all. So it's designed to make us anxiety ridden and miserable, and then sort us out with drugs and alcohol. Get us out of the way. We take ourselves out. We don't need to do that anymore. We got the message that the people have been looking for.
And this is a crazy thing, going back to prison, because I see another loop in this whole cycle. Like, people was getting strung out on all type of drugs in prison, but they started getting strung out on the Suboxones. And then when they got out, then they went to heroin. You know what I'm saying? Like, they say it's to help you get off of it, but it's actually helping people get on to like that type of stuff too, because that's where a lot of the addiction started with a lot of people I know. It started in prison with them getting strung out on Suboxones, and later when they got out, they got hooked on the more the heroin and then the fentanyl and all that other stuff. So it's kind of like contradictory. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What is supposed to help you get off actually starts for a lot of people as well. You know what I'm saying? So that's the side I saw in there. I didn't even know what Suboxone was. Like I remember when I got out for lockup and then people was talking about Suboxone. I was like, what the hell is that? You know what I mean? But that became a major crisis in prison. And speaking about like, and this is the last thing I want to say, just like how we was talking about the government involvement with, the crack cocaine epidemic here with the CIA, the freeway Rick Ross story. Just like I was talking about El Chapo working with the DEA and them shipping, allowing him. They got deals with Chapo and the Sinaloa cartel and allowing him to ship the drugs over here. All he had to do is give up other drug dealers and and cartel leaders over in Mexico, and he was free to keep on doing this while they act like they was chasing him. You know what I mean? But the other side of this is that the chemical. I look at this as weapons of mass destructions that they're using against us. These are the chemical weapons of mass destruction, and in prison is such a big problem with people getting strung out on drugs during the cocaine, the COVID epidemic. That when everything was shut down, don't you know in Indiana prisons they had the highest rates of overdoses around that time? Like they didn't even get visits. So how is the drugs, all these massive drugs getting pumped into the prison? Like they know this is a part of the counterinsurgency. You know what I'm saying? Because if we're sedated, how are we going to be revolutionaries? How are we going to think about being politically conscious? How are we going to think about being critical of the society we live in and look for solutions? You know what I'm saying? This is a part of this strategy too. That's why they're involved in the drug war gang, because it helps to maintain this system. It's a critical component, an integral part to maintaining this system. This is why this makes it the class war. You know what I'm saying? Because they pump it in our community and we get hooked on it. We become drug dealers, drug users and stuff like that. We feed mass incarceration. We feed their budgets. Like
Right.
justification for militarizing the police even more so and carrying out different repressive strategies against the populations, these occupations and everything going on. So all of this is all interrelated. You know what I mean?
It's a fucking movie. Comrade Andy, I see you got some replies to that too. Go ahead. Oh, you're still on mute, Comrade.
Well, I agree 100%. And I mean, I've seen it all my life, and I've seen it get worse. And the idea that they would let up now when the conditions are getting worse is delusional. They're not out to reestablish healthy communities. That's not on the agenda anymore. Even if, like I say, it probably never was, but during the period that I grew up in, when there was a bribery, that it was reasonably more healthy to be a young person at that time. We didn't have that many people strung out. You know, I mean, that they introduced these things exactly like Kwame said, as a means of counterinsurgency. And I've seen good people who were real politically conscious, who were useless when they were loaded. They were on heroin and they were worthless. You know, I take cannabis for little pains, aches and pains and stuff. I'm ashamed of that. But you go in a room and somebody's passing around a joint or something, you're not going to have a productive meeting. I'm sorry. I mean, even at the lowest level, these things affect our abilities. And so they want to, it's like what's that goddamn movie? Matrix. Yeah, they want us to pick our poison, and that's all they want us to do. So we're going to defy them. We're going to beat them, and we're going to raise that army. You know, it won't be a bunch of zombies. It'll be a bunch of class conscious people.
Yep. What you're saying just brought my thoughts back around to what Shanti was pointing out earlier, that we're all being lumpenized. Well, this is part of it. This is a huge part of it in many facets, not just because you become more complacent when you are using drugs to numb yourself to the fucking trauma of existing in this system, but when you're in an economically disparaged area. And again, I'll refer back to Flint and watching this fucking happen as the big three pulled out most of their operations and sent those jobs overseas and left people dependent on, oh, where can you fucking work? The dollar store, the Taco Bell, or the fucking gas station? You can't survive on that shit. And your options are to either go for these minimum wage jobs that even if you got 2 or 3 of them and your spouse is also fucking working, if you have one, then you still can't afford to live. What are you going to do? You're going to keep working for bitch wages that ain't going to cover shit? Or are you going to go sell drugs where you can make more money in a day than you would on a fucking full week's paycheck? And therefore become part of the lumpen, and then also become a target of the system to be dragged into the incarcerated system and for them to profit off of you there. It is a vicious fucking cycle in every way, shape, and form, and it ain't just one loop. It's like a spaghetti bowl of fucking loops. Of any way that you get caught in it, you're going to be dragged in for the system to profiteer off of your shit and to exploit you in any way, shape, or form. And it's all fucked.
Yeah, this was a great discussion, though. Definitely feel like the mental health aspect and the drug aspect was something that we needed to tie into the discussion of this book. So, yeah, I enjoyed this discussion tonight.
Dave, glad you were able to join us. It's a nice treat for a Monday. Comrade Joe, I see you got your hand up. Go ahead, hon.
Yeah, I've been quiet and listening because everyone has made good points. And there was a lot to take off of this chapter. But I was recalling one thing that I believe I heard in the reading, or that I read in the reading, is that due to lack of staffing, that they started pushing pharmaceutical drugs into the hospitals to give it that so-called chill pill until we can get to you type of thing. That ended up becoming people dependent on some kind of chemical to actually have that chill feeling. So I think I heard that in this book, and I thought that was a good point, because I think, and then especially, and then like Kwame was saying, Kwame was in the prisons and stuff, how they started seeing more and more of an influx of mental patients. It's because they were closing the facilities down, and especially around Ronald Reagan's time, he closed a lot of mental facilities down, and that's what ended up starting with where you started seeing homeless people and stuff like that, because they'd kick them to the streets, and then of course they went into the prisons because they're always on the streets. I don't know. So it has been a vicious cycle, and I just wanted to bring those points out. But no, great discussion today, great reading, and I almost got to get going because I have a meeting with Bunchy Carter. I'm up here in Seattle, Washington. And some sister Licentia, I don't know, or she just.
Hey, what's up? And Licentia.
Yeah, I gotta like a little, because I told him I'm in Seattle, I'm ready to put some boots on the ground. How can I be of use?
No doubt.
So I'm supposed to, I guess we're gonna do a little some action out here while I'm out here.
Okay, yeah, that's what's up.
All right. Well, with that being said, comrades, another great reading, another great conversation. I like to listen sometimes too, because sometimes I'll be like, I was like, oh, and then when I want to say something, somebody already done brought it up. And I was like, okay, well, don't keep on repeating or riding on somebody's tail. But the perfect discussion, because it does bring in to today's topic of the whole fentanyl crisis. They're doing it over and over again. I don't know what's it going to be next year. You know, some other fancy name for some other fancy chill pill to just control the society and keep us numb in the minds. You know, that's all it is. It's just like sit down, just shut up, sit down, and just sit there with your mouth open, like staring off in the air and shit. You're like, nah, we got to be strong. But anyway, revolutionary comrades, much strength, much love, and
All
all
power
power.
to the people. All right, Joe.
All right, I'm gonna check out. Let me make this phone
Power.
call. I'm kind of excited. All
All
right, then.
right.
We'll talk. We'll
So,
see each other. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying I was gonna get going too. I know y'all got a meeting coming up anyway. It might already be going on.
It got postponed,
Right.
which is why we were able to stick around. But yeah, we are at about 2.5 hours. So
Oh, wow.
wrap this
I'm gonna
up, but
check out. I got to check out too. I'm sorry, but it's great.
it's all good. This has been an awesome discussion, and I live for this shit. I love these discussions we have.
It does bring us
Y'all
strength,
need
that's
to.
for sure.
Y'all
Does.
need to.
Yeah, Joe, I don't know if you saw my note, but please give Bunchy our love.
Oh, okay. I'll
Much of our revolutionary love.
I'll send the love all the way from the whole Rainbow Coalition.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
All right, bet.
All right then.
All power.
All right then. All right, all power. Good night.
Power, y'all.
Good night.
All right. Y'all have a good night. We will see you tomorrow for those of you who are going to come to the UPM reading group.
What was y'all reading on that?
I believe we are beginning Seize the Time tomorrow. I got to double check the votes on that. Because we were
I think
debating
it's Seize
which
the Time.
one first.
Yeah, it was.
We're doing Seize the
Yeah.
Time.
Okay.
And
What time is that?
7 p.m. Eastern time.
Okay. I might jump in. Y'all using this same link, right?
Yep.
Yep.
That would be dope if you hop in there with us. Hell yeah.
All right.
Otherwise, we'll have a good night. We'll see y'all back
All
here
power to
Friday for the
people.
next section of the Young Lords. All power.
Okay. All
All
power.
power to the people.
My dog even jumped in here to say hi.